All right, here we go. We have Larry Mazza, former made man of the Colombo Mafia. Welcome to Vlad TV.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, you have a very interesting history and a very interesting story. But this is your first time here, so I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in Brooklyn in the 60s.
Yes, I was born in 61.
Okay. And from what you've said, you have a very normal family. Firefighter father, your mom worked at a bank, nothing really crime related or anything of that sort.
That's very true. Some people described it as a Leave It to Beaver, if you remember that TV show. My dad was a lieutenant in the fire department. My mom, like you said, worked in a bank. Myself, my sister and brother all went to Catholic school. We did well, well provided for. And, and as soon as I got a little older, I got jobs. I was working, from a newspaper delivery boy right on up.
Right. And your family's originally from Sicily and Naples, but like third generation.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you're growing up in this very kind of normal household in Brooklyn. You go to high school, you graduate, you briefly go to college. I guess you go to John Jay.
John Jay College, yes.
To study criminal justice of all things.
Yep. Can't make it up.
Yep. But then something happens in 1978 when you're working at a supermarket.
Right. Well, I was still in my last year of high school. I was going to graduate that summer and go on to John Jay. So I wasn't quite 18. And I was working for a supermarket. And while I'm working there, one of my jobs has me delivering groceries, boxfuls of groceries, to houses. And one of them that I delivered to was to a very attractive woman, a little older than me at the time. And it started out, as a little friendship. There became a flirtation and then, a seduction in some way. Because again, she was about 32, I was 17. And we wound up having an affair that lasted almost 10 years.
Okay. And that's all good and well for a 17-year-old high school kid. He's got this older woman that he's messing with. But unfortunately, Linda is married. And she's not just married to a regular working guy. She's married to someone a little different. So let's describe who that is.
I left you with that lead-in, but that's perfect. The funny thing is, she lied and told me she was 29, and I lied and said that I was 18, because being under 18, there were some legalities and things. So she never thought I was under 18. And yes, I find out that she's married. And at the beginning, I'm not overly concerned, because if she's okay with it, I'm thinking the guy must be a doctor, a homeless guy that travels or whatever. But as time went on and we got closer and she started wanting me to meet him to make lives easier, and we'll be touching on that, I'm sure, throughout. But it turns out that he is a high-ranking member, captain, boss of the Colombo family, and his nickname is the Grim Reaper. He's one of the most feared, if not the most feared gangster maybe ever in New York.
Right. Gregory Scarpa, a.k.a. the Grim Reaper, who allegedly murdered over 120 people.
I don't doubt it. He told me he stopped counting at 50. And, as time went on, hearing more and more, if you told me 220, I wouldn't blink.
Right. I mean, not only would he kill people, but I guess he would leave the number 666, the number of the beast, on his victims' pagers.
No. Really, what happened with that was when, with fast forwarding to the war, which we'll get to, and back in those years, we didn't have cell phones. We had beepers. So everybody had a code. If somebody from 13th Avenue got beeped, it would be 013, so you knew it was them. They give you a restaurant to meet at, whatever. But our code was 666. So when we did some damage or we had a meet after that, we beeped and he put in the 3 6s. And that, it's a funny number to use for the Grim Reaper, right?
Right. Well, his other nickname was the Mad Hatter.
The Mad Hatter. We called him Hannibal. There was all kinds of names. We called him Schwarzkopf for a while. If you remember the general from Desert Storm. He
Right.
became our general during the war. We got him a hat, and he wore it proudly. And we called him Schwarzkopf. So he had a lot of nicknames.
Okay, and the Mad Hatter came from the general hat?
Yeah.
Okay, so here you have this guy, Gregory Scarpa, who's a hitman for the Colombo boss at the time, Persico.
Yep.
And you're sleeping with his wife, and actually he gave you permission.
Yes. What happened was, at the beginning, when I didn't know who he was, I didn't feel that overly that sense of betrayal or that I was doing something so horribly wrong. Not that it was right. But as I got closer to him and he started doing things for me, putting me in businesses and helping me earn money and becoming my friend, now I felt that. I felt like I was not a good friend. I was doing something wrong. I felt guilty. And Linda saw that, and it started affecting our relationship. I would not go there as much. I was trying to sort of keep my distance. I was getting paranoid too, because now I knew who he was. And he saw that, and ultimately they must have had some kind of conversation, and he sat me down one day and told me that, and let me walk you through this because it's a pretty scary moment in my life. I would go to the club with him every day about 12:30. We would get there first, and the rest of the men would come around 1 o'clock. So while we're driving there, and something just happened that I was really, really a nervous wreck. He had called me to bring him downtown to see one of the other captains, Scappy, and I didn't show up to bring him. I convinced myself that he was going to kill me that night. So I didn't go. Linda called my house all night. I heard he was calling me and getting messages on the old messages you used to get on the phone. So that next day when I went, he knew I was really off. My stomach was not right. And he starts telling me that, Larry, I'm going to have this conversation with you. You're very mature for your age. I know Linda loves you. I love you. I know how you feel about Linda. And as he's going, my stomach is turning because I know what he's leading to. And I've said this a few times, and I'll say it now too, that I always had in the back of my mind that he would try to convince me to admit it. And I would never give in. Just like out of The Godfather, if you remember that scene with Michael Corleone telling him, just don't insult me. Tell me you did it and I'll let you live. So I remember driving there and saying this in my head, I'm not going to admit it, I'm not going to admit it. Anyway, we get to the club, we walk in, we sit down at the desk, and he's continuing. And he's saying, what I'm about to tell you, I want to leave, it has to stay between us. But I know what's going on with you and Linda. So my heart almost jumped out of my chest. But I for some reason, something told me in my head, this is my moment of truth. I loved her. I didn't want it to end, but it is what it is. Okay. So I looked at him. I says, Greg, I have a lot of respect for you. And I think you're far from an idiot, but only an idiot wouldn't see what was going on. He busted out laughing. He gets up, comes around the desk, puts his arm around me. We walk outside together. Now we get to the front and we go lean on the parking meter. There's a parking meter there that we would lean on a lot, and the sun's hitting us. And he's explaining to me that he's okay with it, but nobody else outside the three of us can ever hear about it. Because if that happens, the two of us will be killed. So that's the first rule I learned. Not formally, but that was one of the rules that was being broken already. And later on, as I got closer to him, I was introduced to his first wife, who lived in Lakewood, New Jersey. And I was told about his third wife, who lived in Vegas and Manhattan. She was a wealthy socialite, and there's a whole story there too between how they all became wealthy through her, or added to the wealth. But in hindsight, I wonder now if I was just making his life easier. He had all these wives to deal with. Now, he was 20 years older than Linda. He was in his 50s, early 50s. She was around 31, whatever. And I was younger. So when he was out with his other wives, which is 4 or 5 nights a week, bouncing around, I was with her. She didn't complain. So that's one of my theories as to how he allowed it.
Okay. And Greg's story is really interesting because I guess before you guys ever met,
Mhm.
he's kind of tied into the whole Mississippi burning
Yeah.
story.
Right.
And this was in the 1960s,
Mhm.
where there was 3 civil rights workers that were killed by the Ku Klux Klan,
Mhm.
and the FBI couldn't figure out how they'd been killed or even find their bodies.
Right.
So they decided to bring the Grim Reaper down to Mississippi, uh, gave him a gun and some money, and said, "Go ahead and find out who the killers were."
Mhm.
And in the process, uh, he actually kidnapped one of the Klan members and tortured
Mhm.
him and found out who it was.
Yeah, that was a little bit more. I was told that he did unspeakable things to them. That's the words that were used. And before he got to that final piece, he had to go through a few lower level Klansmen. So I don't think he was just brought to that guy because they probably, if they had to find out who that guy was, who knew. So he went to some lower level guys and did, like I said, unspeakable things. Ultimately, they got to the guy that had the goods. And what you just said is true. He took him in, threw him in the car. And, I wouldn't want it to be him that night. I could tell you that.
Right, and he actually found out where the bodies
He
were.
found the bodies, yep.
And
And
I guess in 2 years later, in '66, they brought him down to Mississippi again over another murder case over a fire that was set by the Klan.
yeah.
And I guess at that point things didn't quite work out because he wanted more money or something like that.
Yeah, and there was I learned about that later on, obviously, and then he sort of backed away from them for a while. But I think that there's a little bit of a difference. I think before that historical moment, he backed away from the feds. He had dabbled with them before, but once he made those deals in Mississippi, he had carte blanche, and he was able to do whatever he wanted in the streets and never have to worry about being arrested. Carte blanche.
So here you are, you're messing with one of Greg's wives, and he's okay with it. And now you guys are becoming close. And now he is sort of bringing you into the whole criminal lifestyle and having you start to do various jobs for him. So how did that whole situation start?
Well, the first job I had with him, he put me in charge of a legitimate company that was a sales company that serviced fire extinguishers, sold products, cleaning products, paper products to any kind of business. So it was easy for us to get local restaurants and local stores just from his influence. So it started out good. Somewhere along the way, the corporation dissolved and the business went kaput. I don't know why. I understand there was a big explosion in one of the buildings, so maybe it turned out to be an insurance job. So now I'm in no man's land because I was early on. I was on the fire department test, and I had plans of doing that. But I did take the position. I was making money, and I thought I had a bright future. So now, once that does happen, Linda says, "Well, you got to do something for him. What are we going to do now? He has no money coming in." So he invites me into the numbers business, which is the lowest level of businesses in the rackets. It's just like the numbers you get in a 7-Eleven. You go and pick 3 numbers and they pay you. The only difference is we paid more and we always paid the right odds, where the state doesn't pay the right odds and they tax you. So they probably never make as much money as we did in that. But so I started with that. And as I was doing the numbers, I now met people who were interested in gambling, so they sort of tied in together. So I started becoming a player in that business, and I was very improvising. I went to local OTBs, off-track betting, and I recruited people to get numbers for me and I take their horse action, and I would pay track price where OTB didn't. So I was already good with numbers. So I started doing that. Eventually, the door opened to Shylocking. And the way that happens is somebody doesn't pay a sports debt, so they have to go borrow the money from Greg to pay me. And I get a piece of that interest each week. Then I became a Shylock on my own as time went on. So, yeah, the businesses, every day there was something going on. There was nothing he wouldn't do to earn. We had fake credit cards. We had fake tokens in the bridges and tunnels. That's a story. We were selling more tokens than the MTA in the city, and the mayor was up in arms over that. And they put police at the toll booths. It didn't work, and they were on the news one night. And finally, they had to recall all the tokens and come out with a new system. And all the people that bought the tokens from us got beat. They never got their money back. But there was not. He had a little key that would get him in the phone booths. Remember the old days when there were phone booths? Every corner, drive down a major highway. He would drive with the guys up and down I-95 or the Garden State Turnpike and just pulling into rest areas and opening up the phone booths and taking all the change. I mean,
Wow.
when Cabbage Patch dolls were in demand, they weren't on store shelves. We had a whole club full of Cabbage Patch dolls. People coming in for Christmas. So there was nothing he wouldn't do or the club didn't do to earn. But I was basically in those more, I would like to say, thinking rackets where you had to use your head with numbers and build up a business and a rapport with your clients.
Okay, but when you talk about gambling and shylocking and so forth, you have degenerate gamblers who are constantly betting more than they have.
It happens.
And then they try to duck you, and you have to, you can't just sue them or go to a collection agency. You have to get the money back another way. So was there violent experiences during that time?
Absolutely. And it's funny too, because you're not thrust into that. You're watched, you're groomed. And then you get to a point where now you understand, okay? And you can't show weakness. So he would start me out with a small job. I'll give you one crazy example. I had to give a guy a flat tire once, okay? He gave me the ice pick to do it. Showed me the car. I thought nothing of it. I figured the guy parked in his spot or disrespected him somehow. So I go and I give him a flat tire. The next day in the newspaper, man killed fixing flat. He knows I saw that. He knows I know it, but it's unspoken. He wants to see if I come in nervous. I made like I didn't even know anything about it. Let it go. But I knew that was the first little inkling of something. But before that, there were some beatings. There were beatings, and typically they're personal. Somebody abused somebody's grandparent, and you got to teach this guy a lesson. So you go with his son and two other guys. So you think you're doing a good thing for the neighborhood. But to your point, what happens is now it's money. Now a guy owes money. It's a little different. It's extortion now. You're not beating a guy up because he disrespected somebody. And same thing there. You'll go with 3 or 4 other guys, and they're going to report. Were you part of the beating? Did you stand off to the side? So you start getting acclimated, and you do. And later on, you justify it by something you said. If you owe a mortgage payment, the bank comes and takes your house. We can't do that. So we break your arm or your leg or worse. And some people prefer that. They'd rather recover from their broken arm and still own their house. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you're right. That was our method. We had to hurt people that didn't pay. And at the beginning, it was hard for me, but then it became, I hate to say it, second nature. It was almost like they caused it, not me.
Okay. And you start rolling with his son, Greg Jr.
Greg Jr., yes.
Who had his own crew of lunatics, basically.
Yeah. They were very capable crew.
Okay. Were you mostly around them or around Greg Sr.?
I was around Greg Sr., and Greg was going to put me directly with Greg Jr., and I get along with Greg Jr. to this day. We talk a lot. I'm trying to help him get some play and maybe get a little break and come home to die. He's in prison, but anyway, we were very close. We still are. But Linda would not allow him to put me with anybody but him. I had to go direct to him, which helped me along the way. I was going direct to the top of the pyramid. So, but yeah, Greg did have a crew of his own. Greg Jr.
Okay, and you refer to Greg Jr. as a stone cold killer.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, if I had to learn and I had to produce and I had to not show weakness and I was only like a son, imagine how he felt. He had to impress his father. Now, when I say that, I'm not trying to make it right for him or myself. I know what I did was not a very nice lifestyle. We know that. Most of us have come around and understand that. But when you're in it and you have a boss like Greg Scarpa, you cannot show weakness. Or a father like Greg Scarpa. He was even worse to his youngest son, Joey, my godson. Later on, we'll get to that.
Okay, so at what point were you a made man? Did they actually bring you in officially?
Okay, I was proposed when I was about 27 years old. And what happened was soon after there was the split in the family. So I was okayed, I was approved at that point, but nothing could happen because the family split apart. So as the war was going on, Jimmy and I, my partner Jimmy, were doing everything with Greg. We had probably 12 shootouts, probably 4 or 5 actual hits. We were at every meeting, every sit down. We were with the boss of our acting boss who we put in charge. So there were things just out of tradition that couldn't be done if Jimmy and I weren't straightened out. We couldn't go to these meetings and they couldn't ask us not to be there. So long story short, a message was sent through one of Junior Persico's brothers, Teddy Persico, that Joe T would like to get Jimmy and I brought in. Junior sent a message back. His exact words were, "Get those 2 guys recognized." So we had a big meeting during the war where Joe T was sworn in as our acting boss. Different guys were put in positions. Jojo Russo, may rest in peace, was the underboss. Other guys were made captains. Greg was officially made a captain at that meeting because once a guy gets straightened out, they have to be put with a captain. And Greg insisted that we stay with him. So we went downstairs. It was the back of the Sheraton at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. And it was a lackluster ceremony. It wasn't like the movies. It was sitting around a table. We were private, but with AIDS, we had a bypass prick in the finger. We did burn the saint. There was actually a napkin that got caught on fire too. So it was really a little, but later on, guys were getting straightened out in prison. Guys were getting straightened out over the phone. So it got weakened. That's why I talk about it and I almost joke about it. It's not what it probably once was. But we left that meeting officially good fellas. We were introduced and we were directly put with Greg as our captain. So they didn't have to move us.
Okay. Now, Michael Franzese, who I've interviewed a few times, he was a captain in the Colombo family as well. Did you know him?
I did not. He was before my time. Believe it or not, I met his father. One of the few occasions he's been out of prison. And I knew of Michael. I knew of him. I knew his conquests. I knew the money he made. But I'd love to meet him. I would love to meet him. I understand he's really become a different person now. And I don't know really if it's true that he's a minister and all of that, but God bless him if he is.
Now, I also just interviewed Frank DiMatteo. And he was part of the Colombo family with the Gallows.
Did
you interact with him at all?
I know the name, and I'm not 100% sure because there's a few DiMatteos. There's a Mikey DiMatteo that I know, and some pronounce it DiMatteo, but Mikey was Mike DiMatteo. I don't really know for sure, to be honest with you.
So you're rolling with Greg, and he has this really kind of crazy lifestyle with 3 wives, and he's a captain in the Mafia and so forth. And then in 1986, he becomes HIV positive.
Yes.
Talk about that whole situation.
Okay. Greg was like a swashbuckling type of person. He lived with his own rules, his own laws, no ethics, even in the family, just did things the way he wanted. And he liked to live. So we would have drinks at night. None of us were overboard. None of us were drunks. I mean, we'd have 2 or 3, have dinner with a bottle of wine, but he would like to go to the bar every night and have his scotch on the rocks or vodka martini. And whatever he drank, we drank. So I didn't even have to think about it. But he would take 3 Anisons without water. He just popped the Anisons in his mouth. Aspirin, Anison, I guess it's similar. And he did this every day since he was in his 20s because he didn't want to get a headache. He didn't take them if he had a headache. He took them to prevent the headache. What happened over all these years, those aspirins were digging holes in his stomach, ulcerated his stomach. And it came on pretty sudden that he had, they all burst at the same time. So he gets these bleeding ulcers and he gets rushed to the hospital. I get the call that he's in there. And after 2 or 3 operations, his whole inside started bleeding again. Wind up is the surgeon had left one of the arteries hanging. So he's close to death. He needs blood. So they call in all his friends and family. The hospital wanted to give him their blood because it was screened already. And this is early on in age. It's just, this whole HIV thing was new. Pretty much like today with the coronavirus. It's still, you don't know. So he insists, laying there half dead, that one of his men give him the blood. And his thinking was, he knew none of his men were gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he preferred, knowing that was at that time the possibility of where it was coming from. And he knew that it would be, in his head, his best shot, being fearful of the disease. So about 30 of us show up. Everybody gives blood. There's one match, and it's one of his guys, Paulie. Paulie was a handsome guy, had more girls, but he was a weightlifter, and we found out later on he used steroids back in the day, and they shared needles. So the 1 out of 30 was Paulie, and he matched. So he gave his HIV-tainted blood to Greg, and Greg became HIV positive.
Okay. Did anyone know that at the time?
At first, no. They kept it to themselves. After he got home from the hospital, and I was with him every single day, helping him, nursing him along with Linda. And one day he calls me in, and him and Linda are sitting at the table. And they sit me down, and the first thing he tells me is, I want you to know you have absolutely nothing to worry about. He says, something happened to me when I was in the hospital. And that's where it came from, because I didn't know what he was talking about. And he told me that he was infected with HIV while he was in the hospital, bad blood. I remember crying, feeling so bad for him. And, you know, there was a strange closeness there too, because I remember him telling me, you know, I told his oldest kids, he said, you're the only one that cried. I mean, that's a little peculiar to me to this day, but you know, I was supposed to be like a son to him. So it was bad news. And I felt horrible for him, but that's, you know, to get to the point, that's where he got the AIDS, and ultimately it took his life, but he lasted a lot longer than they thought, because he made it through the whole war, and which we're getting to, and into prison. Even, you know, he lasted in prison longer than they thought.
By 1991, that's when the third Colombo family war started.
Right.
So talk about the start of this war and what actually happened.
That's a very important point, because, you know, just the general public or readings or people that weren't involved don't realize that the war started sooner, way sooner, although there was no shooting. There was tensions after Vic Arena became the acting boss. Some people weren't happy with that, but they had to listen, because it was Junior's wishes, Junior Persico. So as time goes on, and this is what I was talking about, where I was proposed, there was about a year or two where Vic Arena, from 87, 86, 87, 88, was only straightening guys out, making guys, bringing them in his area, in Queens and Long Island. He wasn't making Brooklyn guys anymore. He was making captains, bumping good fellas up, giving them their stripes, again, that were closer to him, closer to Queens. So we saw the power thing happening. We were talking about it with our captains, who were Junior Persico's nephews and sons and brothers. But there was nothing serious that happened. About 88, give or take, maybe even 89. And like I said, there's a lot of rumblings. There's rumblings. There's bodies turning up that were excused as somebody didn't make a payment or he was disrespectful, but it was more power play. And Greg was telling me this, you know, and in hindsight, as we know, he had information. So the things he was telling me were accurate. So there's a very historic meeting. He gets a call. Actually, a guy comes to the club that I know, Chips, and tells me that Jimmy, who's Jimmy Angelina, our official consigliere for many, many years, would like to see Greg tonight at his club. So I bring the message to Greg. I get in a car with Greg that night, and I bring him to Jimmy's club. Now, Jimmy was the type of consigliere that what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be trusted by all the men. Your job is to save lives. So if they call you to a meeting, you have no problem going. I mean, that's just the way it is. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you go there knowing you're not going to be killed. Okay? And that's the feeling everybody had about Jimmy. He was trusted. So we go to this meeting, and I'm about to walk away with Chips. But Greg, he's always smart. He's always that step ahead. He says, Larry, you could stay. He says, Jimmy, you don't mind, do you? And nobody's going to disagree with Greg. He says, no, Larry could stay. So I'm standing there with him, and they're talking, and Jimmy explains to Greg that Vic Arena asked him who he would side with if he decided to take the family position officially. We need all the captains unanimously. So Greg, I'm thinking to myself, this guy just got out of the hospital after 2 months. He's half dead. He probably doesn't even know what's going on. He looks at Jimmy and he says, Jimmy, he says, I am sick. I'm half dead. He says, I will line up wherever the chips fall. I will stay in line. He couldn't take a position. So Jimmy says, all right, Greg, well, we'll get back to you, whatever. We drive off. Now I was close enough to Greg to ask. I says, Greg, why don't you declare yourself? And he looks at me and he says, if I would have said yes, that I would back Vic. Jimmy is the family consigliere. If he goes back to Junior and says that Vic is recruited Greg and Greg is going, Greg's dead. Okay? If he says no, I will not, Jimmy's going to tell Vic, Greg won't come over. Vic has to kill him. And he digested this like that. So now I'm saying to myself, wow, what treachery. Less than 2 weeks later, Jimmy's disappeared. Nobody knows where Jimmy is. You don't kill consigliers. It's taboo. It's almost worse than killing a boss. Okay, so no, but eventually we find out he's not coming around. He's done. He's gone. Vic Arena now makes Carmine Sessa the new consigliere. He knows this will make Greg happy because Carmine Sessa grew up under Greg. We grew up in the same club together for 12, 15 years. 12 years, me and Carmine. And we did hits together. We did beatings together, you know. And here he is, he's not a consigliere. So Vic asks him now the same question he asked Jimmy. Go poll the captains, see if you can get them to come over to my side. Go see Greg. He comes to see Greg. Greg starts laughing at him. He says, you see what just happened to Jimmy? He says, you're not going to get these guys to come over. They're relatives. They've been under Junior for 20, 30 years. He says, it's impossible. You're going to get clipped next. So Carmine panics now, Sessa. He puts a quick team together. If he was smart, he would have asked Greg, should we take Vic out? He probably would have said, no, not yet. But if he really wanted to take Vic out, he should have told Greg Vic would have been dead. There would have been no war. Instead, he goes and puts a team together that, for whatever reason, they weren't successful. Vic spotted them in the street. I wasn't there, so I don't really know. They take off, and now there's an official split. That lasts about a year. Negotiation, one negotiation after the other. So we're in a Cold War, and there's a lot of things going on, like businesses stopped amongst each other, and there were beefs over number runners. Like one of our number guys died, Joe Sapp, good fella. I think he got bumped up to captain under Vic. He had a huge numbers business, like 300,000 a week. That came to us because he was also grew up under Greg. So once he dies, Wild Bill, a captain under Vic Arena, we could go on with these names, it'll get a little confusing, decides he should get those numbers because Joe was under him at the time. He was like the underboss, Billy. Greg tells the runner, you bring the numbers to us. So we're sent for a meeting to go meet with Wild Bill. We go to his club. I'll never forget it. It's a Thursday night. There's 7 of us. We pull up. We turn the corner. This is going to sound almost pathological, but there's a few people that were there and they'll tell you how many. There had to be 100 guys lining the street waiting for us. When we pulled up, I remember saying to myself, and I tell you about weakness, that I'm in the front seat with a friend of mine, Joe Fish. The middle car is Jimmy and Greg. The back car has 4 of our heavyweights. So there's about 7 of us, whatever it was, maybe 8. And I remember saying to myself, I think I should just keep going. But in the back of my mind, I said, if I pull over, Greg will rip me a new one in front of everybody. So I pull right into the driveway. We get out. There had to be 6 or 8 guys surrounding us with guns. I see a gun behind Billy's Lincoln. It's like an AK. There's guys on the roof of his club pointing rifles at us. And I'm not exaggerating one iota. I promise. I almost feel silly saying all this stuff. Greg gets out of the car. They surround him. I had to tell them when they told me, put my hands on the car. I looked at the guy and says, you cops, am I under arrest? And they laughed. It sort of reduced the tension a little bit. I said, Greg is here to talk to Billy. So they escort him in. We're out there for about 2 hours. And during the 2 hours, the guys that are around us are coming over to me and Jimmy because we're like the eldest guys now. We had to recruit younger guys from the neighborhood to be with us because Greg Jr.'s whole crew was in prison. So they're coming to me for advice. And I remember telling them, we had one guy there was an ex-cop, and he had a Glock that shot like 16 or 32 rounds. I don't even know. We all had revolvers because we were underfunded for this war. So I remember telling them, if any shooting starts, just fire. I told the Dean, who had the big gun, I said, you just fire at the guy with the machine gun and we'll all run. I said, we can't win. I said, we got to just try to survive. So we're nervous. We spread out in case they started shooting. After about 2 hours, and I'm watching one heavyweight after another show up to this meeting. Joe Scopo, Patty Amato, Joe Waverly, Nicky Black. I mean, every heavyweight, and it's just Greg in there. If it was the other way around, and there was this war situation, Greg, they would have never walked out of our club. It would have ended the war right there. So he comes out arm in arm with Joe Scopo, the underboss from that side. He comes over, he gets in the car with me this time, and we drive back. And he explains to me what went on in there, and we're in good position. They think they're with them, but we're not. So now we played the middle for a while. But once we get back to my pool room, I remember telling Greg on behalf of all the guys, and I said it to him just like this, it's Greg, don't ever do that to us again. Because I think he was forgetting that maybe he was old, he had a couple of years left to live. All those guys were young, with young families, young kids. We could have walked into a slaughter. And he laughed. He says, I had it under control. So I said, all right, whatever. But a couple of days later, and it shows you, what I called this, I think in my book, was the Cold War, the War of Will. Who was going to show more strength? The same thing happens with another numbers situation. And this fat Sal from the other side says, I'll come and see you tomorrow, meaning one of our runners. So we go there, just the 4 of us, me, Jimmy, Greg, and I think another Richie or somebody. There was 4 of us. And I'm standing out front with Jimmy. I'm waiting for Sal to pull up. We see his big white Lincoln pull up. As he pulls up, I open the door and I say, Greg, he's here. Greg starts walking out the door. The guy takes off. So we won that number thing too. So we had all the numbers. And Nicky Black was upset with that. I remember him saying, I thought we weren't going to do business with these people. But Joe Scarpa said, not Greg. Greg doesn't count.
The way I understand that the war sort of progressed, and you could kind of fill in the blanks for me, was that Vic Orena believed that Persico was sort of out of touch, and he had found out that he was doing a made-for-television biography, and that was going to put the family under a microscope and cause people to get arrested.
Right. Well, there was several things. Okay, I did hear something about that book. I don't know that it ever came out, but what happens is when a guy's looking to make a power move like this, we see it in politics on a daily basis. You start slandering the other guy. So Vic started putting out some bad things about Junior. He actually called him a rat. Now the guy's doing 135 years. You know, maybe you could use a different word. Out of touch. Maybe he's losing it. Maybe we got to be careful. But to disrespect him that way was not right. Although I have a little gripe about that, and I'll tell you guys at the end. They were upset that Junior represented himself at the trial. And his trick was, you can't take the stand. You're not allowed to take the stand. So as an attorney, he can get the things out that he wanted to get out. And one of the things he did say was that, yeah, I'm a made guy, which is taboo, but I'm not the boss. He was trying to get out of that commission 100 years. And because of that, Joe Scarpa's father, Ralphie Scarpa, got 100 years also. Because now they put him as in charge of the commission and things like that. So that's why Joe Scarpa had a gripe with Junior Persico. But yeah, so he slandered him because he wanted all the captains to take his side. And some of the other families had their own little reasons. Like John Gotti was big behind Vic Orena because he had a problem with Junior. He could never be boss of all bosses while Junior was alive or the Chim was alive. So he needed that extra vote at the commission. And he was hoping Vic would have got in because he grew up with Joe Scarpa. A lot of people don't know that. And if Vic would have won, there's a good chance they would have killed him and Joe Scarpa would have wound up being the boss.
Okay, well, you know, I think you touched on this already. Persico ordered a hit on Orena, but Orena managed to, you know, escape that hit. And then, you know, Orena turned around and he sent his younger brother, Mickey Brown, and his two other sons, Michael and Willie Boy, into Brooklyn on a murder mission. And based on that, 15 people disappeared.
Well, if it was their side, I don't know of 15 guys on our side that got killed. Are you saying they did that or that was the total for the whole war?
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, well, no,
this is a fairly convoluted story.
Yeah,
so
well, you got me.
I'm
not sure about that because, like I said, I knew there were a few bodies turning up that were claimed to be killed for some reason, but it was really paving the way for this takeover.
Okay,
but 15, I mean, that's way more than I know, and I'm not saying it's not the case, but I didn't know about those.
Yeah.
I
mean, because they're saying that overall 30 people got killed throughout this war.
I don't think it was that many. Now, again, I know it's more than the newspapers wrote about. I mean, you know, Greg, Jimmy, and I killed 4 ourselves, shot, injured several others, and there were a few guys that got killed on our side, but I don't think it was 30. Now, again, it depended on how many were killed during the Cold War. And like I said, I know of 2 or 3 that turned up and it wasn't, you know, it was because of that. But I don't think it was that many. Depending on where you got that from, like, you know, it could be somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you just mentioned that you were involved in various hits. Can you talk about those situations? Well,
during the war, yeah, I guess those are easy to talk about. The ones before the war, I'm not proud of. I don't like that I was involved in them. It was that weakness thing where you had to do what you had to do, and I got over it and I did it. But but the war hits like the Nicky Black hit. He Nicky was a heavyweight on the arena side. As a matter of fact, he was going to be the next consigliere. Won the if Vic Arena won. And I had an Uncle Albert that just died recently at about 94 years old. And he was a dinosaur with the Colombo family, right from around Avenue U. And he sort of got bypassed for Nicky Black because Nicky was very big in the unions and made a fortune. And I guess it was Joe Colombo that made him. But Junior Persico put a stipulation in that he will never rise above Goodfella. He'll never be a captain. He'll never be in administration. For some reason, he didn't like Nicky. And that's why Nicky went to the other side. So anyway, he's going to be the consigliere. And we're winning the war at this point because this was a hit later on. We did a few hits earlier, which we could backpedal to. But Nicky was sent a message to my Uncle Albert. Well, he told him right in the club, and somebody else in the club was there that echoed it. So we knew it was accurate. That they called me Butchie at the time. If your nephew Butchie doesn't come over to our side, I'm going to kill him. So we got the message, and I went to my Uncle Albert's house that night. And I'll never forget him telling me this. He says, Butchie, don't you ever forget, blood is thicker than water. He was telling me, he says, you got nothing to worry about with me. But it was said, and he told me, be very careful. So I said, all right, I appreciate that. Thank you. We went, and Nicky became our #1 target now. So we were now staying out because this is like later on in the war. It's raging. We can't stay in Brooklyn. So we were staying out in Jersey. I was actually staying with my family. And each day we would drive into Brooklyn, meet Greg at his house, and drive around the neighborhood looking for our enemies, like hunters. I mean, we were really just hunting them down. So we pull up to a spot where we had a shootout. We killed a guy recently there. We injured a guy there. And while we're sitting there, I got the binoculars. We're about a block away, and we're looking at the club because we saw a couple of cars we recognized. But as I'm looking at the club, I see this Land Cruiser or Land Rover, it's a Toyota, pulls up right in front of the club. And I said, these are my exact words, that's Nicky Black. I couldn't believe it. It was like, we found our lost dog. And Greg says, let's get him. Those were his exact words. So we start driving down the block. Jimmy's driving. Greg's in the front. I'm in the back. Greg puts the fake siren in the window. We had the coffee cups. We always wanted to look like we were doing surveillance. So as we pull up behind him, Nicky's pulls out. He pulls to the red light, makes a left. We're close. Jimmy's got it under control. Greg's getting a little crazy. Hurry up, pull up, pull up. But, you know, Jimmy's smart. He knew when the move would be made. So as we follow him around the triangle, he comes all the way around and starts coming back to where he was coming from. And he stops in front of the house where all the cars are parked that we recognized. One of the guys comes out. His name is Anthony. That's all I knew him as. As he pulls up, he's handing an envelope into the car. A big, thick envelope. Probably, obviously, it was money. We pull up alongside Nicky. I'll never forget, I can't believe to this day, how during a war, okay, where you're threatening people and you're shooting people and we're shooting each other back and forth because we wouldn't do it. We had watched the mirrors. If a car pulled up on us, 2 guns were out ready. This guy was looking forward and he never turned his head. I could only think he thought we were cops. And he was probably telling his nephew who was sitting there, Joe, they're rolling up on us. Like they probably thought we were the law. They probably saw us following them. So anyway, we pull up. Greg has a rifle and I got a shotgun. He's got 2 buttons to push. Now this is late on him too because he's starting to lose his mind, Greg. From the AIDS, the dementia was setting in. And he was doing lots of clumsy, comical things. So we pull up and he points the gun out. He hits the clip. All the bullets come out. He hit the wrong button. He was supposed to hit the safety catch. He hit the clip and the bullets fall out. But I was already hanging out the window. I had a bandana on and a baseball hat and glasses, sunglasses. I lean in. I was probably less than 6 inches from the back of his head with a riot control shotgun, and he never turned, blasted him. I remember seeing his whole face hit the windshield, and the nephew started screaming. We drove down the block, and as we got down the block, we still heard Joey screaming. That was his nephew, Joe. And I remember this, again, because it was during the war and it was kill or be killed, I was actually feeling very satisfied that this guy just told my mother's brother that he was going to kill me. I mean, and he would have done it. So he invited that. He made himself the number one target. So, we drove off. I remember dropping Greg off. And then Jimmy and I, believe it or not, had a time constraint. We had to go babysit his daughter for about an hour. So right after that, we went to his house. We poured a scotch. We sat down. We watched Seinfeld and babysat his daughter for an hour. When the wife got home, we got in another car and we drove past the scene. And I remember it was surreal. There was literally maybe 1,000 people. The neighborhood, everybody knew Nicky Black. It was like John Gotti to Queens, it was. And I pulled up and I asked these young kids, teenagers, I said, what's going on here? And I wrote about this in the book, this exact moment, because I'll never forget it. I remember opening the window and saying to them what happened. And they looked at me and they said, oh my God, they got Nicky Black. There's a big Mafia war going on. I says, no kidding. Wow. I shut the window. And as I shut the window, I sort of saw myself real quick. And I looked at myself. And I remember saying, yeah, there's a war, all right. I said, and it was I was like floating away, saying to myself, and I'm like this high of a target, and I'm this much of a prominent player in this war. Never would have dreamed of it just 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm still not even 30. 29 years
right.
old,
Because you just killed a major guy in the mob.
It was the biggest hit in the war. It was the biggest hit in that family, probably almost, since Joe Gallo. It cracked their base. Some guys started coming over to our side. They started second guessing themselves, and we heard it. And we heard it from Greg Sauce. We heard it from other guys coming over from the other side. And it was obvious too. It was, they were falling apart.
Did everyone know that you were responsible for this hit?
Unfortunately, yes. And I say that because Jimmy and I were getting concerned with having we were the only ones doing anything. We already killed 2 or 3 guys already during the war. Okay, this one was there was one more after that one. And we would go to these meetings, and Jimmy and I would be standing there, and I'll never forget it. Greg would be telling the details to not only Carmine, who was the consigliere. I don't know why he was telling him, but okay, he was the consigliere. But he would tell other guys, other captains and good fellas. So now there's like 5, 6 guys that already know everything we're doing. And Jimmy, we would just look at each other and roll our eyes and say, what are we going to do? I mean, he's the boss. What do we do? There were times in the car after that, later on, a few months later, where Jimmy and I would look at each other in the mirror because it was getting out of control. This whole war was getting out of control. It was beyond out of control. Where he knew what I was thinking, Jimmy. I could kill Greg right here and this war is over. Not that I would do it, and I didn't do it, obviously, but we would look at each other in the mirror when he would come up with some silly thing to do. Like, he wanted us to dress as FBI agents to go get somebody out of the house. And I said, how are we going to pull that off? I says, we can get guys cheap suits and they don't recognize or whatever, but you need credentials. He looks at me and he says, I can get them. Don't worry about it. So all these little hints are being dropped. We had the scanner, if you remember that. We had a scanner where we were listening on a top secret code, frequency. It's like a 5-digit number. You can pick it out of the air. We had it. And we're listening to the FBI, talk to the police force, the task force, the NYPD. They're following us. We're following them as they're following somebody else. We find out where they're doing surveillance on Vickery. So we're getting addresses and places where to go. So, it's just crazy time.
Okay, well, this was the big hit, but there was 4 hits total during the war?
Well, yeah. The first one we got was one of the guys that was on the botched attempt on Greg early on. His nickname was Vinny Venus. And we were driving the neighborhood and we were finished. It was the end of the day. We were going to head back to the pool room, which I owned at the time, and call it a night and just go have a drink, all be together where we're safe. And as we're pulling down a block, we see his car. And then off to the side, he's hanging a Christmas wreath on his garage door. So we drive around the block. We set up this plan. It was a simple plan that to jump to, when we get to the corner, we're going to put a piece of tape on our plate because we had no crash car. We're in a legitimate van. As we come around, we forget that. We don't stop and cover the plate. We're supposed to stop, and 3 of us are going to get out. Greg, myself, and one other guy is the plan. Greg already got the window open with the rifle out the window. We pull up, and I'm about to open the door, and I hit a shot. And he looks at me, goes like that. I said, okay, I'm not going anywhere now. He shoots him 2 more times. The first one knocked him dead. I mean, he was down on the floor. He was finished. But he hits him 2 more times. We go back to the pool room. That was the first one where we retaliated. The next one after that was Nicky Black. No, but in between, we shot Joe Waverly twice, but he lived. We shot Funzi D'Ambrosio. That's where another fella got killed that was a member of the Genovese family. But he was in a Colombo social club. He shouldn't have been there. And that's the message. There was no problems. It was okay because he shouldn't have been there. Yeah, like I said, there was numerous shootouts and stuff. So the first one was Vinny Venus. Then there was the Waverly shootouts. Then we got Nicky Black. A few months later, we really shot up Joe Waverly again, but he still survived. This time we hit him like with 6 shots in the behind and the stomach. But what happened, there was an ambulance having a coffee break right on the corner and came, and they immediately hooked him up with IVs and blood and whatever they had, and they saved his life. They took him to where the police get taken. Normally they would take him to Coney Island Hospital, and he probably wouldn't have survived. They didn't have a trauma unit. They took him right to the where police go when they're shot. So he survived, but he has to wear a bag to go to the bathroom and things like that today. He's not in good shape. He just got released. And then the last one we did, yeah, there was all this. Somebody else got another guy in Long Island on our side, but later on we got Larry Lampese. There was a little personal issue there too with Greg. But this one we were so frustrated, Jimmy and I. I mean, we just were being used and overworked. I mean, for lack of a better term, just 12 hours a day with this Grim Reaper, Mad Hatter, whatever you want to call him. And it was worse than a job. I mean, it was every day. So we started saying, I said, we got to send a message. I mean, what do we do? And I made a joke about it, and I don't mean to say to joke about it, but I said, we got to massacre somebody. I mean, we got to send them now. We don't want to just kill you, you know? Nothing was changing. So we get the information on this guy, Larry Lampese. We get his exact time he leaves the house, exactly how he locks his gate, and he got this from his source because they were doing surveillance on him, and they passed it along to Greg. So we get there this night at about 3:30. We're sitting there less than 10 minutes, because that's what they said. Somewhere between 3:30 and 3:40, he comes out, because he goes to his bus yard. He has school buses, so he's got to be there like 4 in the morning. And in no time, we see the lights on the caddy back out. So we pull up. Greg's already got the rifle out the window. He hits him, but the guy's crawling away. So the 3 of us jump out. We walk over to him, and Greg and I were firing. I had the shotgun again. He had the rifle. And I remember at the end of it, Jimmy went and put one like right behind his ear. So this was a bloody mess, this last one. And like I said, a lot of it was frustration. It was now we were just in the twilight zone. It was a nightmare what we were living through. And if nothing else was going to end it, maybe something like that would. But soon after, it got ended by the feds.
Now, there were 4 hits that happened during the war. Before the war, can you say how many hits you were involved in?
Well, I didn't count them, but like I said, from a lower level up to being involved, probably, again, from a very small level to probably 20 that I knew. There's one that happened right in the club that me, Carmine, Bobby Zam, and Greg Jr., we're standing in the club. We know Greg's upset with this guy coming in. We don't know how upset. Guy comes in, and apparently he had made a comment to somebody that Greg is a rat. We didn't know anything about this. We're standing in the back room with him, and we were told to be there because we knew he was upset with him. So after he collects the money from this guy, counts it, barks him off, goes through his whole business routine, he says, "So, Donnie, what is this I hear I'm a rat?" You saw the blood come out of his face. He says, "Greg, no, we were drinking. I didn't mean anything like that." Greg asks him, he says, "Do you have any paperwork? Can you prove that statement?" He says, "No, of course not, never." As soon as he said that, the gun came out, he shot him right there. Now, do I count that? Do I not count it? I don't know. I was there. There was a bunch of those type of things. But the funny thing about that is that's a rule. If a guy calls you a rat, you could kill him on the spot. And most guys wouldn't do it. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably tell the guy, or, maybe give him a beating, or, but Greg would go with the rule. You're not supposed to call somebody that, unless you can prove it.
Okay. How did it feel to be involved in your first murder? Like when the dust settled and you
well,
to really process.
There's sleepless nights. I says, it's not easy. And for most guys in the life, for most guys, they don't like doing it. There's a few that get pleasure in it, and they get crazy nicknames like the Grim Reaper, Louie Haha. He laughs every time he kills somebody. I mean, that's weird, but that's how he got his nickname, Louie Haha. But there was some, like one of the first ones I was on was where Greg's daughter was almost raped. If she didn't handle the situation the right way, it probably would have turned out bad. But she handled it right, got herself home, called us. We went that day to the car service, and we beat the guy close to death. And I remember driving back with Greg, and he was still upset. We should have killed this fuck, this and that. I says, "Greg, I think we taught him a serious lesson." I could talk to Greg at this point. He trusted me. I was sort of his mini consigliere. And he always told me that because I was maybe a little different than the average man. And I said, if he had done what he set out to do, I says, yeah, I without a doubt. I said, but I think in some ways it's better he knows what happened to him for that thought of raping a 14-year-old girl. And he agreed with me. But then that night, I think maybe between him and Linda and the upset in the household, the next day he came back and the plan was set up to kill him. So this was one of my earlier ones. And it wasn't that hard because, again, if it was my own sister, I would have done the same thing. I would have gave him the beating. If maybe I would have wanted to kill the guy. I wouldn't have needed Greg. I would have just protected my sister. So it wasn't such a bad. I didn't lose sleep for nights and nights and nights over that. I found later on that little Linda did because she feels like she caused it. And, there's a lot of psychological things in this life and problems and stuff, families deal with. So then there was another one where it was a friend that was told to get out of town because he killed a good fella in the Gambino family. You can't make that right. So Scappy had to sit down for him. And I remember, we were all on pins and needles, hoping Scappy could save him. And Scappy comes back that afternoon, comes walking in the club, and this still gives me a little feeling in my stomach. He says, "Gentlemen, we have good news and we have bad news. The bad news is Tony's got to go." We pretty much knew that. The good news is we get to do it. That's pretty, I'm saying, where's the good news in that? But I understood later on, if the Gambinos would have got him, they would have tortured him. They would have left him in the street for everybody to see. We were able to do it quietly. That grave that was dug at Wolf's Pond, by Gregory's house. And, that one hurts because he was us, one of us. Later on, Joe Brewster had to get killed. I was very indirect on that one. But nobody wanted to see him get hurt. He was loved by all of us. And, but Greg also knew the ones you could handle and the ones you can't. Like when he had to kill the girl that was possibly going to expose Alley Boy's whereabouts when he was on the lam, which is not 100% sure anyway. They thought she may. I remember Greg, there was a bunch of us wouldn't even take us. He said, I know who has the stomach for this one. And a few of them went and they killed the girl. And I remember Scappy coming in the next day after that one and saying, we're all going to hell for this one. So it is, there's a lot of, like I said, psychology, and there's a human element to it all that people don't realize, because of the movies. Everybody's not that cold-blooded. And I only became a hitman in the eyes of the public during the war. And I've said it some places. I says, you can't describe me that way before the war. I didn't kill for money. I didn't kill for revenge. I wouldn't kill because somebody, it had to be directly in the world we were in. I wasn't in the killing business. But during the war, if you want to call me a hitman, go right ahead, because they were trying to hit me.
Okay. Well, Greg Scarpa was loyal to Persico.
Yes.
And in 1991, Arena actually sent some men to go kill Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that whole situation.
Well, it's funny. We had the pool room, and we had a ritual where we would all meet at Greg's house about 12 o'clock, have a cup of coffee, get in a car or two, and drive to the pool room. We would never go in one car. For some reason or another, I was still going to the gym, working out, whatever, and I was going to walk because it was a nice fall day. I was going to walk from the gym to the pool room. And I remember everybody saying, be careful. I said, I got my gun, whatever. So I'm walking to the pool room, and I get there, and I see Jimmy and another friend, Tom, in front of the pool room. And, thank God I didn't sneak up on them and kid around. Like, hey, bang, they had their guns in their hand. I didn't know, but I didn't kid around, God forbid. And I said, they just tried to kill Greg, they told me. So I said, what? What are you talking about? Where? So they explained to me what happened. So I shot over to the house right away. When I get there, there's feds, cops all around. But we go into the house, and Greg is sitting down with 2 or 3 of the agents, and he's telling them that, no, there must have been some kind of drug war between 2 groups, and we got caught in the crossfire. They know he's lying. We know everybody knows. But what happened was they knew the time we left every day. But that day, my car wasn't there. And I don't really know the reason, but I remember Greg saying to others, he didn't tell anybody I wasn't there. This is how he thinks. He says, the one day you're not there, they try to kill us. He says, I know. I said, I'm telling you, Larry, so you were there. You make sure everybody in the family knows you were there. So that was like a scary thought to think, even for a second, that, especially at that point. So he comes out, and he's got his year-old grandson in his arms, and he's walking down the steps with his daughter. The hit team should have saw this and called it off. We would have, and we did several times. We had situations where there were innocent people, and even though Greg says, no, we're going to get this done, we drove off, and we had our little argument, whatever, but that's arguable. They say all is fair in love and war. It's arguable. We would have called it off. They didn't. So as they get down into the cars, Linda takes the baby back and goes in her car. Greg gets in the Lincoln, and there's about 4 or 5 guys in the Lincoln. It was when the big ones in 91. You could fit 5 big guys. So they drive down to the corner. As they get to the corner, a truck comes and cuts them off. And I remember Danny Boy telling us, I knew it. I said, it's going down. That was his words. It's going down. We knew it was coming. But the guy, so when the truck stops there, they all jump out of the car, and they see 4 or 5 shooters with masks on and shotguns shooting at them. So they start shooting back. Nobody's that brave. So everybody stopped. They didn't want to get closer and get shot either. But they're shooting over Linda's car with the baby in there. She dives down. She told me this several times and covers her baby. And she hears the pings hitting the car and the pings hitting the other car. And there's a shootout going on over her car. So now our guys jump back in the car. The truck driver left enough room. At first, we thought it was a mistake. Later on, we found out there's a guy named Peanuts that liked Greg a lot. And he wanted to give him that out to get out of there. Don't know how true that is. We heard that later on. So Greg is able to get through. The Mercedes is a smaller car, is able to get through. These guys were in a big van. They couldn't fit because they had like 6 or 8 people in this van. So they get stuck there. They have to leave the van, run to their getaway cars. And one of those cars was Vinny Venus. So after they drove off, he drives past the pool room, and we're in front of the pool room, and he drives by. He thinks the hit went down because he heard all the gunshots. He doesn't even know. He was like a crash car, whatever, along with the getaway cars. He gives us the finger. He flashes us the finger as he's driving by, thinking Greg is dead. We didn't know really what he meant by that. But I guess it was just like a little farewell. So he sort of became a little bit of a target after that, and that's the first guy we got.
Okay. Well, the war kept going until 92, and then Arena was convicted of racketeering, the Osera murder in 89, and other charges. He got 3 life sentences plus 85 years.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I mean, by that time, 58 soldiers and associates were sent to prison. 70 members were convicted because of the war.
Right.
And I mean, everyone's roster got down to much lower numbers.
It became, it became at that point, every man for himself. You know, there was no more loyalty. There was no more looking out for each other. You know, it came a point where when it came out that Greg was an informant for 30 years, well, I was in there for about a year fighting my case. And I'm approached by Vic Arena, and he asked me, he heard something about Greg, that he's a rat. And I went after Vic. I went after him. I wasn't going to stand for that. And guy gets between us. A friend from the neighborhood, Mikey's a good fellow with another family, actually moved up a little bit. And he stood between us. He says, no, just listen. It's a rumor. We don't know for sure. So I moved. I was sleeping in the same area in the dormitory as Vic. I moved my bed away. I didn't want no part of him anymore. Somehow or another, they moved me. They moved me to another floor, back to where I'm with Allie Boy, Junior Persico's son, and the heir apparent who's supposed to take over this whole thing. But just before that, 2 days goes by. It comes out now in the newspaper that Greg is bad. They call me in the bathroom again. The same guys, Vic, Mikey, and another guy named Lastarino, Frankie Lastarino. And now they show me the newspaper that he admitted that he was a rat for 30 years, or an informant, whatever word they want to use. And now I got to put my tail between my legs. Now I can't go after him. I can't. So I'm still at the other side of the unit, but I get moved. Now, there's nothing that unusual about being moved. They bounce you around. You go to Otisville back. Then, you know, for whatever reason, I wind up back on the floor with Allie Boy and some of my closer guys. And I remember talking to Allie about it, you know, talking about Greg and what is this going to do to us. He tells me that him and his father knew about Greg for 20 years. When he told me that, my heart came out of my chest again. It came out the day I heard Greg was bad, and now to know that the boss and his son knew about it and allowed this man to exist, these are all pretty bad things. You know, I've seen guys get killed for a lot less. Like I said, you know, a few of them that I talked about. And here, he's an informant all those years, and you let him exist, he's ruining lives, you know? So they had approached me several times to talk to them, and I had no intention whatsoever until after he flipped and I heard about, that these guys knew about him, the feds needed information on the corruption because it was about to be exposed. So at that point, I was able to make a deal. I said, but I wouldn't do it without bringing my partner Jimmy in under my so-called umbrella. And I walked out on them 3 times because they weren't going to let Jimmy come in. But finally, they did. And they were really interested. I couldn't give him anything. Greg already gave him everything. Carmine Sessa, the one I mentioned before, our consigliere, was the first one to flip. Then probably 5 or 6 captains and 20. They said the Colombo family clogged up the system with guys trying to cooperate. So I was lucky in a way because, like I said, I had, information on the, not exactly who it was, but what led them to Greg's source. And it was very important. They sent these high-level Justice Department people to come see me. And, and I did my 10 years and I'm home.
You find out that the Grim Reaper had been an FBI informant for like 30 years. And from what I understand, he had like a partner in the FBI. He got, I think, $158,000 over the course of probably more. And they would actually tip him off to like where his enemies were so he could go and kill whoever, as well as letting him know when he was about to get hit and so forth. Now, by this time, you were basically facing life already in prison?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I was never
what
were
you already convicted at this point?
No. I was fighting the case. Had some heavyweight attorneys. I had investigators. I had a supportive family, thank God. But, when all that came out, I was also now a good chance I was going to be mocked by my own family because they were already wondering. They were asking me, didn't you know about this? And I'm denying it. I had no clue. You guys didn't know. I mean, I didn't know. And there were going to be sacrificial lambs to put the family back together, and it would have been me and Jimmy. So, I'm not making excuses, but I'm giving you the reasons I made a business decision. I was fighting to get 17, 18, 20 years. They were at 25. We were at 15. And I would have settled, and Jimmy said all along, whatever you do, I do. Whatever you do, I do. And at the end, I got a message out. I told him, go check for that treasure map. We had our little secret place to get messages. I says, go see, and there's a treasure map there. And I let him know that what I was planning because of the corruption. And he was fine with it. Whatever you do, I do. So.
Okay. And you became a key player in Scarpa's corruption case.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there's 3 rules in the Cosa Nostra. Number 1 was never have an affair with the boss's wife,
right? Which
you had already done,
right?
Never get involved in drugs,
right? I didn't do that, but
you didn't do that.
The crew did.
Number 3, the crew did. But number 3 is never to rat.
Well, don't forget, number 3 is you never go against the family. Your boss is your boss till the day he dies. They killed Paul Castellano while I was around. They tried to kill Vic Arena. He tried to take over the family. So he must have been told the rules too, Vic, right? When he got straightened out. But yet it was okay for him to try to take over the family. So that's another rule. And the rule of talking to the law. Yeah. That's one. But they were all broken.
Okay. How did you feel to cooperate with the feds?
Well, I sort of laid it out a little bit for you. There's a lot of ratty things to do. Okay. I never grew up snitching on my fellow friends. I didn't expose anything. I fought for the family. I went into the courtroom and paid all the monies and borrowed money and was paying lawyers. I was a trooper till the very end. When it came out about Greg, I knew I had to make some kind of decision. When I heard that Alley Boy and his father knew, that's pretty ratty. I mean, you could throw that word around, but there's a lot of ways of ratting, and guys were admitting that they were part of this family, which they weren't supposed to admit, because now the first thing they had to do was prove there was a family at war to make it racketeering. So if nobody admits there's a family, guys started admitting it. So there was a lot of things to do. It becomes more of a business decision. And it's, and a survival decision. Like I said, I wasn't born to tell on people. I mean, but I'm lucky that they came to me and they needed the information. They wanted to know about the scanner. They wanted to know about the phone numbers we had, who we were calling before hits. Greg was calling his handler to find out where FBI was so we could go do a hit. So this was going on, and also, while we're away, this is one thing that a lot of people don't know or should know. We're fighting this war. We get pinched. Jimmy and I were planning on going on the lam. I get arrested down in Florida. He goes. He's hiding out. At that point, we were earning about $7,000 a week in different things. $3,500 each. Less expenses to people who were running it for us. While he's on the lam and I'm facing life in prison, our own friends are trying to take over our businesses and cut us out little by little. So a few months goes by, that $7,000, $3,500 each became $4,000, $2,000 each. Says, all right, I understand things, 3 months goes by, $500 each. Couple of months left. They give Jimmy, and they don't give it to him, they give it to somebody to bring him, a go-between, because nobody has to know where he is. $180. Okay. I remember a conversation I had with Jimmy through somebody over this. I said, if you go back, you're going to have to hurt somebody or bring your gun to collect and take what's ours. Or you're going to get arrested. I says, I think that's what they're hoping for. I remember saying to myself, these rat bastards are trying to get my partner Jimmy to come into town to get arrested so they could just take our business. That's the thinking. And that's why there's a lot. When I was the worst rat ever? When I joined this life. When I did to my family and the parish I grew up in, the kids I coached, the kids I taught karate to. I'm a bigger rat to them.
Well, you were facing how many murders at the time?
Well, 4 that I was, considered a trigger on, 120 conspiracies, because everybody on the other side that was a target is a conspiracy to commit murder. They only had to prove 3 of those. So, it's...
Okay. Yeah. So you were essentially a mass murderer who ended up getting 10 years.
I would definitely not consider myself a mass murderer. Because again, I said in the life, if I was killing innocent people, like the son of Sam, or I was killing, I could have been a sniper in the army and killed 50 or 100 people. The cause is different, I understand, but you're not going to call that sniper a mass murderer either. I killed people that were in the life, that broke the rules, that are as guilty as I am for doing it. Don't break the rules. That we all knew that. And then during the war, you're not going to call me that, because the mass murderers were trying to kill me too. It was kill or be killed.
Serial killer? Would you take that title either?
Of course not. No.
Okay.
I was a mob guy that did what he had to do, that was groomed, taught how to act, taught how to be a good fella, and I lived it.
Okay. But here you are, a multi-murderer. Is that a fair?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're a multi-murderer who most people end up getting double, triple life. You walk away with 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's the deal. And then with that deal, basically, you could talk about whatever you did, because that's part of the deal, right?
Yeah. Yep. I had to tell on myself and the corruption. But I know go ahead. I think I know you.
Well, this was, when you made that deal, what year was this?
I was a year in, I guess, 92, early 92, maybe February of 92. Yeah.
Okay, so this is 92. Mm-hmm. You become a cooperating witness against the Scarpa case. And then the next year, Scarpa ended up pleading guilty to 3 murders and conspiracy for a bunch of other murders.
Right.
And
he got the same 10 years. He got 10 years.
Well, he originally was sentenced to life, but because by this time he was blind in one eye.
Oh, okay.
And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah?
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, I knew he had the 10 years, but I knew he wasn't going to live through it anyway, so it didn't really matter.
Well, yeah. He originally, I mean, from what I researched, he got life in prison, but his health was so bad between the blindness and the AIDS. At this point, he had full-blown AIDS.
Yes.
And in May, he was actually, the sentence was reduced to 10 years. But a year later, in June 1994, he ended up dying.
Yeah.
So he ended up serving like a year or so before he died.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
When you found out that he died, how'd you feel?
You know, I wasn't heartbroken, obviously. I mean, I was, my whole feeling for him soured. It went from a betrayal to, you know, just a fraud. You know, as strong and tough and ruthless as he was, you know, it turns out you were a fraud. You did it all with the protection, you know? So, but there are parts of my inner recesses that I think back to, you know, the camaraderie and some things that, you know, I'd rather think about that, but it's hard. But if you don't mind, I want to touch on something where I thought you were heading with the 10 years. You're 100% right about that. Yeah, I got a second lease on life, but I didn't invent the system, okay? I want to know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Carmine Sessa had many more murders than me, okay? Because he came in and ratted on the whole family, he got 4 years, okay? And he was the consigliere. There's a long list of guys, okay? Where do you start and where do you stop? You know, you want to say 50 guys ahead of me that were above me, set the example. And Greg, you gave him carte blanche. Why don't we ask the corrupt agent, whoever he is, that enabled Greg to live that life? So I'm supposed to feel bad after, you know, hundreds and thousands of guys were given this deal. Where does it start? If you want to go way back. And the first guy they gave the deal to, don't give him that deal. If you don't give him that deal, nobody does it. You didn't pave that way. You know, I'm supposed to take a life sentence at this point of the game after everything coming out, the things that I exposed about the corruption. And I mean, you know, it's their system. I don't agree with it. I'll tell you that much. I wish I could go back in time to the old law where you could cop out to 20 and do 11, you know, but it is what it is. And we had a president that was trying to change things too for the better, but who knows what's going to happen with that if you want to get into politics.
You take this 10-year deal, right?
Well, it was 0 to life. It was 0 to life. I could have got in, you know, if I come in and I mess up by lying or being a wise guy or trying to play them like gas pipe, they can go as high as they want. But I knew once I made the decision, I said, I will do what I have to do.
Okay. And you ended up getting 10.
Yes.
So you still have to basically serve the rest of that 10-year sentence, and you're in prison. And I assume at some point word starts getting around that Larry Mazza has cooperated against the Mafia. And not only do you have other Mafia members in prison, but you have associates, you have guys that can pay off, other gangs, very violent environment. Were guys trying to get at you at that point? And how are they protected?
At the very beginning, I was under in a protective custody. I didn't go into the witness protection. I didn't change my name, any of that. And they bounce you around where you can slip in. They know where you could slip in places, okay? Ultimately, when I was finished, I didn't get sentenced till like I was in for 5 years already, maybe 6. So I only had 4 left or whatever it was. I was in Yazoo, Mississippi, okay? And I'm not going to mention this man's name because he's a good man and he may still be involved in one of the families. But he was I could tell you, he was in the Genovese family, a high-ranking, well-respected guy. that comes into Yazoo, Mississippi. And naturally you gravitate the Italian guys together, whatever. And it's not a high level place anymore. So, there's a lot of guys in that made deals or pleas that were very favorable, where they might have hurt somebody and they're not looked upon. They have these places. So I'm in this place. I don't even know why this guy came in. So we start walking the track together. And he starts talking to me like we're in the street. I had to stop him. And I'm going to call him Buddy. And I'm going to say, Buddy, you realize I didn't go out like a hero. He stopped. He looked at me. He started spitting at the floor, kicking dirt like Billy Martin used to do when he had these arguments with the Yankee games. He said, you and Jimmy were 110% men. He says, Greg Scarpa, boom, he starts spitting and spitting. Like he's violent inside. He says, I don't even want to hear any of that anymore. I says, well, let's just not talk about business. I'd feel better. So he says, I understand. We start walking again, walking. An article gets sent into him from Jerry Capisi. And at the beginning, Jerry Capisi and I were fine. He called me. He wanted to write a book with me and stuff. And, but something happened where he turned a little bit and he wrote, one of the very few bad articles about me. Most of the articles, they don't call me bad names. They just tell the story and let it go. So anyway, they send this article in. He brings me into the bathroom, just me and him. He shows it to me. He says, you know what they're expecting of me, right? So I says, yeah, I do, buddy. He rips it up, throws it in the toilet bowl, starts spitting at it, kicking the toilet bowl, flushing it. The life was ruined. It wasn't ruined by me. I'm not, it was too late in the game where the thing had just fallen apart. Okay. And if I had advice for other guys trying to keep it together, get out while you can. Leave. I got a friend, a young guy named Larry. He's in and out of jail for the last 20 years. You know what one of the lawyers said? He's going to do life on a consignment. He's going to wind up doing life on a consignment plan. Come out, do 10. Come out, 8. Come out, 12. It's done. It's done.
Okay. Well, eventually you get out.
Yes.
And were you offered witness protection at all or no?
No. Well, I was early on, but I told him early on I don't want it because I have less faith. I have more fear of the FBI coming after me because of this whole corruption thing and making my life miserable or hurting me than I'm worried about. Because like I said before, if the family really wants me, they gotta want 50 guys before me. Really. And you want to spread out and find 50 guys, whatever. And I'll, I hate to say this, but I'm not the easiest target if I'm even somewhat expecting it. I'm going to keep, but I don't want to go down that road. I like to think they know better now. Don't get yourself a life sentence or a death penalty. Just go on with your lives and try to survive like I did.
Okay, so did you ever hear about a hit on you or anything else like that?
No, I haven't.
No.
Okay.
Well, you go and write a book.
Yes.
And at one point you run into an actor, Armand Assante.
Yes. Yep.
And who's been in a bunch of movies. He played a mafia boss in American Gangster.
Yes.
He was in the Hoffa movie with Jack Nicholson, and he actually played John Gotti in the 1996 TV series.
Great version. Yeah.
Okay. And he actually started working with you with a few things.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Armand. I met him in a restaurant, very chance meeting. And I heard the buzz behind me. So I looked and I recognized him right away. But I'm not one to go running over or anything like that. I'm not going to do that. I could see Babe Ruth walk in and I wouldn't do that. I just, I'm not going to do it. So after it all settles down, I'm walking to the bathroom. I got to go to the men's room. And I see him looking at me. And I just give him a little wave and I keep going. Again, he's going to sit down and eat. Finally, he's got nobody's bothering him. Coming back from the bathroom, he's still looking at me. So I lean over and I says, you did a great John Gotti. I'll never forget it. And he looks at me, he says, you think so? I says, yeah, and I should know. He says, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Sit. I sit down, I tell him who I am. He starts pulling his hair out. He says, I don't believe this. He couldn't get over it because he was working on something, a story about the FBI and how they intertwine with the mob and stuff. And when he heard that was me, Greg Scarpa, and I was the one with the wife, he couldn't believe it. So we sat there for 2 hours and talked about different things. I gave him the book. He loved it. He wrote a great testimonial in the back page. I don't know if you saw it. If you look in the back page of the book, you'll see a testimonial. And he was very honest about how it moves forward. It's going to take a long time. But he was very helpful. I could call him now. He'd call me right back. He's a wonderful guy. And he gave me some tips on how to, go about making it a success.
Well, eventually you end up starting to work with Robert De Niro and Scorsese on the Irishman movie.
Okay. What happened with the Irishman was there's some of the cops I told you about. I grew up with some cops that were on the task force. They knew me. They were looking for me during the war and other guys. And fast forward to 20 years, they're all retired, and some of them are working for Robert De Niro's private security. So when he was getting ready to do the movie The Irishman, he asked if they knew anybody from the life that can help him with some technical things about getting rid of weapons and how do you hit a guy that's in trouble and he knows he's coming into a bad meeting, things like that. So I gave him he used about a dozen different things. They even changed some of the script. And he read the book. He told me it was terrific 3 different times. He can't believe I did it myself, which I did. And obviously I had an editor help me at the end. And then I got a small role in The Irishman. And all of this has been helping me because he sent me to Scorsese's house afterwards. And then he sent me to Nick Pileggi's house. And Nick Pileggi and I also hit it off. He loved the book. He told me his exact words were, "You wrote a mob classic, kiddo." He calls me kiddo. I mean, he's much older, obviously. And I'm honored to say that he is in the process of writing a screenplay for me based on my book to be hopefully a TV series. I have a producer named Joe Paletto that he sees it and he's doing everything you need to do, putting his money where his mouth is, promoting it. And, once Nick writes the script, he's going to approach the heavyweights, Netflix, HBO, Showtime, Paramount. So.
Right. And you were a technical advisor and a consultant on The Irishman. And I guess you and De Niro actually worked together. And you would kind of explain to him, this is why you use 1 gun instead of 2.
Right.
This is how you do the whole getaway car thing and, and so forth. The movie comes out and is very much applauded as a masterpiece. I believe it won a bunch of awards and so forth.
It didn't win any awards.
Oh, it did?
It did not win an award, but you're right.
It was nominated for a lot of stuff.
Yes, it was. It was nominated, yeah. It was a shocker that it didn't win anything. And if anybody should have won an award, I thought Joe Pesci, because he was not his normal crazy guy. He was out of character playing a subdued boss that was been around for 100 years. So, De Niro was fine, but I think he was just his typical Robert De Niro. He could roll out of bed and play that part,
Well, I interviewed Michael Franzese, Frank DiMatteo, as well as Alan Gunnar Lindblom, who was associated
Alan,
with Detroit,
my buddy.
The Detroit, the Detroit Mafia.
Yep.
And all of them have their own kind of connections to the Jimmy Hoffa story in their own way. But all 3 of them have said that movie is entertaining, but just fiction. Like, it's just not true.
It was good. It wasn't epic. It wasn't The Godfather. It wasn't Goodfellas. I don't think it was in that level. And I can tell you that the story was a complete lie. There's no truth to the story. Yeah, certain little things that happened were, but Sheehan did not kill Jimmy Hoffa.
Pure shit. Yeah, it was entertainment. Yeah. But, it's Hollywood. Hollywood's good. Yeah. But it's all bullshit.
The Irishman is a joke. The Irishman was a freaking fallacy, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what Eric Shawn, he said, what do you think of The Irishman? I said, it was a freaking joke. The whole thing was a made-up story by some pathological liar named Frank Sheeran, who nothing he's ever said was confirmed, ever. Not a single murder, nothing.
Yeah, as far as the Jimmy Hoffa thing, I would have to take their version because they're from there. They have more input than I do. And I tend to believe that it's not accurate. And the reason is that Joey Gallo hit was totally made up. The guy, I don't know why Frank Sheeran's name even came up in it. Everybody knows who did it, you know? And I remember Nick telling me, even Marty knows who did it. But yet they went with the book. And Robert told me, DeNiro, that they wanted to follow the story the way it was written in the book. He said, you know, it's not his position to say what's true or not. He followed his, so I understand that. It's Hollywood. But no, like, there's no way you go in, and I told him this, you're not running into a place where Joe Gallo's in the middle of a war, and he's got bodyguards with 2 guns, like Clint Eastwood. I remember saying that to him. I said, no, you may have a backup gun, and you probably will, but you got to worry about firing 1 gun and hitting your targets, you know. But he went with that. Also, like you said, the crash car, there's no way you send the crash car around the block anywhere, no less Manhattan, where there could be a garbage truck, you get stuck at a light, the cops tell you to wait. I mean, and now you come out of there, and it's funny because there's a picture in the Post, the New York Post. A couple of days after I told him this, they were filming that scene. He runs in, they go through the whole thing. He comes out, and the car's not there. Just what I said happened. And they had everything closed, and he still couldn't get around. And the picture's him, he's standing out with his 2 guns in his hand. His hands, you know, and he says, where's my getaway car? So I was right, but yet they did it that way. And there's no way you're going to you're going to let the guy leave. That's your, you know, your getaway.
Were you actually in the Irishman movie at all?
I was. It turned out we filmed the scene 40 times. And I, you know, myself and another actor named Craig DeFrancia, great kid, was in The Irishman. He was in Power, TV show Power, and he was in The Green Book. So he's got a little resume. But we had a small part. We had to walk up steps, down the corridor, walk in and shoot Albert Anastasia, the original Mad Hatter. And 40 times we did this, and wound up, they really edited it down because I don't think they were comfortable with the barber, the guy in the barber seat, Albert Anastasia. When he got hit, he has to jump out of the seat, run towards the mirror, break the mirror, because he thought that was us. He was disillusioned with all the shots in him. And it just wasn't looking good, I guess. So they sort of took that whole ending out, and they just showed us walking up. You see us going in, and then you see the flowers like a funeral arrangement. And then you see actual footage of the newspaper clippings. So, but it was good. I was originally supposed to play the part of Joey Glimko. This would have been monumental because I would have been in a scene with him, Al Pacino, and then both of them together, introducing them. And some of the things I said, there's 2 things that happen in the movie if you watch. On the scene, and you know who got it? Bo Dietl got the part. Bo Dietl, he was in The Wolf of Wall Street. You probably know who he is. He comes, and he's a good fella from Chicago that makes the introduction. And I'm supposed to explain to them, and I told him that Jimmy doesn't drink. I said, he's an Irishman, but he don't drink. And nobody around him's got to drink. So I go through this whole thing on camera, and while I'm doing this, I'm carving out a watermelon. And at the end of it, I'm carving out the watermelon, and they say, we want you to add 1 line. He don't drink, and he don't like watermelon either. Okay, that's the script. They say, now add this, but I do. So I know where they were going. So I go through the line and I say, he doesn't like he don't like watermelon, but I do. And I grabbed the bottle and I said, and I like drinking. I added that myself and I poured it into the watermelon because that was the whole object. They're spiking the watermelon. They left that whole thing in with Bo Dietl. Then I had to explain a part where when Frank, this big massive guy, walks into a room, a crowded room, he says he'll walk right down the middle of the room and it parts out of the way. Everybody, he doesn't even touch a person. I threw in, he parts everybody out of the way like Moses from the Red Sea. They added that into it. So there's a lot of parts. The part where they get rid of the guns, I had told DeNiro, I said, if they ever went over the Belt Parkway Causeway I says, with divers, there'd probably be enough guns to start another war. So he says in the movie, you got to watch for this now because it's mine. He says there's enough guns down there to arm a small nation. So he changed it a little bit, but you know, another one I told him where something Greg would do, like if he's putting a guy to rest, at ease, not to you know, he's have a gun. So once you go for the gun, the guy's going to run. He already knows he's in trouble. So Greg would sneeze or cough and reach for his handkerchief. Now the guy's relieved. Oh, God, it's only a hanky. He's got a cold. When the hanky goes back in, he comes out with the gun. So he did something similar in the movie when he had to kill that guy outside the front of the store or something. So it was pretty good. And then I got a part playing a corrupt ex-cop in a TV show called The Perfect Murder. And there I had a lot of lines. I was behind a bar and I was being sarcastic with cops. I was an ex-cop, and they come in to question me about a murder that I was a suspect in. And then you ever seen all the movies? Somebody pops out of the back seat with a gun. That kills me. I laugh all the time. I says, how do these people always get in the back seat? You know? But I have that scene. I got to pop out and put the gun to the guy's head and tell him start driving, keep your hands on the wheel and all that stuff. But it was good. It was a good scene for me. I got a lot of good reviews.
Well, Larry, a hell of a life.
Yeah.
A hell of a life. You know, it seems like you've gone through so much and you're extremely, extremely lucky. I mean, number one, to be alive.
Absolutely.
And number two, not to be doing life in prison.
Yes. I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
I mean,
and I don't say
things
that.
had worked out a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
It would have, you know, one situation, slightly different outcome. Some person had a slightly different thought during that time.
Yep.
Things would have been over a long time ago.
That's why I say, you know, somebody was watching over me, for sure. And you know, I'm not like I said, Mike Francese, he found God and all of that. When I say I'm blessed, I mean it from my heart. And I thank God.
Yep. Well, I appreciate the time and I appreciate
thank
the
you very
story.
much.
And you know, looking forward to the whatever movies or other projects that are made about your life.
Can I mention the website for my book? Is that okay?
Please do.
Thank you. It's www.larrymazza-thelife.com. Every book comes signed by me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All the best to you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Let's talk.